Oh my. That is an absolute beauty. Big bad Boeing. Should you buy Boeing stock right now? In this video, we're talking about very important recent news for Boeing and 3 reasons why I decided to buy Boeing a few weeks ago and actually make it my biggest position. Let's do it. What's going on, everybody? My name is Matthew. Welcome to my channel, and today we're talking all things Boeing. I wish so badly that I would have forced myself to make this video for you guys earlier when I first decided to invest in Boeing. Since then, I'm up over 20% right now, and I wish I could have gotten you guys in on those stock market gains. But don't worry, we're in a long-term mindset on this channel, guys, so I think there's still plenty of potential for Boeing in the coming years, and I don't think you've completely missed the boat yet. But as always, I have to say I'm not a financial advisor, not a professional by any means, and always do your own due diligence. So, without further ado, today's video is super simple. We're just going to talk first recent news, and we're going to talk about their new investor, the new production updates with their Boeing 737 MAX, their layoffs, and customers deferring or canceling their orders. Then we get into the 3 reasons why I bought Boeing. Let's get right into it with some recent news, which I now realize is kind of redundant because shouldn't all news be new and therefore recent? And then probably the biggest headline today is that an activist hedge fund invested in Boeing, and that would be Dan Loeb's firm, Third Point. Is it Dan Loeb? Loeb? And for those of you who don't already know, activist hedge funds are investors that go into a company after investing and try and make internal changes, oftentimes in terms of management. And that way, they try and put the company back on track for better performance. So no, these are not activist investors. They don't go around trying to make companies more environmentally sustainable or anything like that. So one example of Third Point, the new investor in Boeing, being an activist and actually having success is in their work with Campbell Soup, in which they selected a new, better CEO. And according to this article, after Third Point went in and made that change in CEO, Campbell Soup's stock went up 47%, beating the S&P 500 in that same time frame. But here's an important point to be made. Third Point did not buy Boeing stock. They bought debt in the form of Boeing bonds, not stock. And one last time for good measure, say it with me, Third Point did not buy Boeing stock. Now this still means that Third Point does see potential in Boeing and they are invested in Boeing, but don't expect the price of Boeing stock to go up because you think a new investor has just bought a bunch of Boeing stock. And at this point in time, I don't think it's very clear how active this activist hedge fund will be within Boeing, whether or not we'll see another Campbell Soup scenario where they go in and change management and try and turn things around. Third Point might just end up being a passive investor in this case. So again, we got 4 pieces of big recent news. That was the first one. Now we're going to talk about the second one, and then we'll get into the reasons why I bought Boeing. So news piece number 2, and this has been out for a few days now, Boeing is resuming production of their 737 MAX in certain locations at a low rate. Production of the 737 MAX had been suspended by Boeing since January of 2020, so it's great to see that they're starting to ramp up again. And low rate just means that they're going to ramp up production, but not nearly to full capacity like they were before. In fact, far from it. Their monthly production of aircrafts will be much lower on a month-to-month basis, but they do intend to ramp this up slowly over the coming months and years. I feel like this one's pretty self-explanatory. Boeing is making planes again. That's kind of what they do, so it's good news. But the reduction of the rate at which they're producing planes ties into our third piece of news. Boeing lays off 7,000 workers, and this is just the first wave of job cuts for Boeing. In my interpretation and the interpretation of other analysts, this is actually good news for Boeing stock because it's saving the company money. And as harsh and insensitive as that may sound, that is business. I'm not a soulless person. Of course, I feel terrible for anyone losing their jobs right now, but we cannot get emotional with stocks. And again, as we just talked about, they're producing planes at a lower rate, so this just makes fiscal sense. And finally, before we talk about why I decided to buy Big Bad BA, our last piece of news, and this one is honestly pretty shocking to me. Analysts across the board are saying not enough people are smashing that like button. And for that reason, they do not see Matthew Ho Stock News channel seeing prolonged growth. But the good news is you are now an activist hedge fund investor and you can save this channel by subscribing and hitting the like button on this video. But in all seriousness, I do want to say thank you guys so much for reaching 5K with me on this channel, which I started just 2 months ago. We've already gained almost another 300 subscribers in a day, and that's just absolutely phenomenal. And the last thing I'll say is I started this channel as a place to provide more information and relevance to stocks, and it seems like you guys are loving it, so thank you so much. The actual fourth piece of news is that customers are deferring their orders. And this goes way beyond Qatar Airways. That was just the prettiest headline that I could find that would get the point across. And deferring their orders just means that they still have the order in place, but
they don't want the planes right now.
So this is both good and bad for Boeing. It's bad because this means that they have to store all of the planes that they've already produced for years. And slowly but surely, Boeing is running out of storage for their 737s because they're grounded. But customers deferring is also good news because it means they didn't cancel their orders. And to be honest, this is kind of like a look on the bright side analysis of things. It's like saying, hey kid, your dog ran away, but the good news is he's not gone forever. He'll come back in 4 to 5 years. And in this case, SMBC Aviation Capital didn't cancel their 68 plane order, which was good. It's just delayed for 4 to 5 years. But there are still orders being canceled. In fact, in March, 150 jets were canceled. However, because there's always a however, just take a look at Boeing's backlog. They have over 4,000 planes on backlog for the 737 alone. And please correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I believe that means Boeing has 4,000 orders still in place. So 150 canceled is 150 schmanfled. But not really, that's still bad. Okay, so that was the news, and now we're talking about the 3 reasons why I decided to buy Boeing a few weeks ago. The first of the 3 reasons, and this one might be a little controversial, I think Boeing is too big to fail. And you may have heard that term too big to fail before, and if you haven't, it just means that this company has too much of an effect on the American economy for the government to just let it go bankrupt. And here's why I think so. In 2018, when things were all still fine and dandy, 31% of Boeing's revenues were from the US government. Most, if not all, of Boeing's revenue from the US government comes from 2 parts of the Boeing company, and it is not the commercial airplane production. Boeing is much more than a company that just makes commercial airliners. In fact, it's well diversified into 3 main categories. First is the Boeing Defense Systems, or BDS, and then there's Boeing Global Services, or BGS. And these 2 parts of Boeing generate all of the revenue from the US government. Here's a shocking fact. About 21% of the Department of Defense's procurement budget is dedicated solely to Boeing. 21% of the US government's Department of Defense's procurement budget, in case you didn't hear me the first time, is dedicated to one company. It's Boeing, if you didn't already, yeah. In my mind, there is no way Boeing is ever going to fail. The government is way too invested in Boeing, figuratively, to let it go out of business. So the way I see it, it's almost like Boeing stock has insurance from the US government. The second reason why I decided to buy Boeing stock a few weeks ago, and this still rings true today, is that it's down over 50% from its all-time highs. It hit a peak of $440 per share in March of 2019, and then came all the issues with the 737 MAX. Now don't get me wrong, this stock has been beaten down like no other, and I don't think we'll see those all-time highs again for a few years. But today, even after the huge run up to $173 per share, Boeing is still down 60% from those all-time highs. And let me just blow your minds real quick. Even if we see a rise to $220 per share, which would be exactly 50% below its all-time highs, that would be a 27% gain from today's price of $173 per share, and that's following today's 13% gain in Boeing stock. So even if your goal, your price target for Boeing is 50%, half of its all-time high, and you bought in today at $173 after this huge rally, you still have 27% to gain. And finally, the third and final reason why I decided to buy Boeing is its liabilities. More specifically, their unearned revenue. As I touched upon briefly in my last video about the top 5 growth stocks to watch right now, Unearned revenue is a liability on the balance sheet that simply means Boeing has already been paid for a good or service that it has not yet provided. And to get rid of that liability, all Boeing has to do is to provide that good or service. And well, if you look at Boeing's balance sheet, more than half of their current liabilities are in unearned revenue, $52 billion worth. And I assume that's due to the backlog of over 4,000 planes that we talked about earlier. And with production underway again, which we also talked about earlier, wow, this video is so well constructed and everything comes full circle. That means these liabilities will be erased from the balance sheet as they produce more planes. What's going on, guys? It's Matthew back here editing this video, and I was rewatching this part and I realized it was a little unclear. What I'm trying to say is that since their unearned revenue is such a large part of their current liabilities, I think that anyone who sees their balance sheet and says, oh, this is too many current liabilities, they're not realizing that those liabilities are actually not a bad thing, in my opinion, because the way to get rid of those liabilities is just to make more planes, and that's what we want Boeing to do anyway. So I think the liabilities are overstated, and I think this is a decent deal. I hope that clears things up. Thanks so much. Keep watching. Finally, they did take on a lot of long-term debt recently, but that's to be expected given the current situation, and overall they still have more total assets than they do total liabilities. If you found any value in this video at all, and I hope you did, please consider smashing that like button, subscribing, and turning on those notifications. If you want to check out any of the books on this here bookshelf, a lot of them will be linked in the description below. Go check out my Instagram for daily updates on my portfolio, this channel, and motivational posts. And as always, we will end with the quote of the day. Patience is a virtue. It will never hurt you. Obviously, I don't know who said that. I actually didn't even bother looking it up because this is something that I've been saying since I was a little kid, partially because it rhymed. Not only did I choose this quote because it's true, but also because we're talking about Boeing, and Boeing, in my opinion, is going to be a fantastic long-term hold, and that requires a lot of patience. And lastly, as mentioned in my last video, we cannot ignore what's going on in the world today. So if you would like to support the Black Lives Matter movement or the protesters, I left some links in the description below as to where you can go and donate if you have some extra money. Thank you guys so much for watching to this point in the video. That really means a lot to me because I do put a lot of time into these videos and editing them for you guys. As always, don't forget your peace and thank yous.